Pat.
All right. All right, we have a quorum.
All right, we have a quorum.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you twice.
We're gonna have to do like a quick intro to
Okay,
Teams.
so I'll mute.
Oh, mute.
All right. It's all you, Amanda.
Amanda, do you want to give a quick rundown of our Teams tool here?
Yes, absolutely. So welcome everybody. If this is your first time on Teams, welcome to online virtual meetings. So just a quick rundown. I wanted to real briefly just show you what you're looking at. Although it's pretty self-explanatory, you've gotten in, so congratulations. But here we go. This is what I'm seeing. Just a few things. Yes. Hi, Jess.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Glad you could join us. Just in case you need to know where your mute is, if you want to turn your camera off and just have people hear you but not see you, that's an option. If for some reason you need to share your screen, there's a little button here that shows you, or that allows you to share what you're doing. You can also make comments during the meeting. Hi friends, sorry, I'm cutting out, can't hear you, gotta go, something along those lines. See who else is in the meeting, all those fun things. There is a way to take control of the slideshow. You can request to take control anyway. Sometimes that works for you, sometimes not, but if there's at some point you want to share in the presentation, you can click on that button. I think that's it, unless anybody has questions on anything.
Amanda, I will say, this is Mandy. Unless they're an administrator or a member within our organization, they cannot share, and they cannot request control of the meeting, just so you know. So usually this would just apply to staff. So all the guests, I don't think they'll be able to have access to share.
Okay.
But just a heads up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and then I do have kind of a list of everyone that has logged in so far. But it's also great. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of conversation, maybe just kind of, hey, it's Jane, wanted to put my vote in, whenever we're doing those types of things, so that we can have a recording of who said what, or who approved or didn't approve, or motioned, things like that, just because this could get a little tricky, but I'm not too worried about that. Just yeah, just as a heads up.
Fucking computers.
I want to take back over. I think he's still muted.
Okay, let's do a roll call just to make sure we know who's here. I'm just going to go through the list on the agenda. Mike Bishop, just say present or here. Eric, Mike Ellis, Jane Geetson,
Here.
Kurt Hasberger.
Here.
I'm here. Emily,
Here.
Josh,
He just signed out.
signed off. Andrew Martin.
Here.
Jessica, I see you.
Present.
Denny Sturtevant.
I'm here.
Gina. Pat Waring.
Here.
Scott Weirda. And Dan Williams. Daniel. Okay, we've got a quorum. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, one thing I noticed that Jane asked or suggested if there's anybody else in the room with any of you, mute your microphone so we don't get a lot of feedback here, but approval of the minutes from the March 2nd meeting. They were included in your package. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. I'll take a motion to approve.
I can do that, Bob, Pat Waring.
What was that?
This is Kurt, second.
All right,
Support.
we have a motion. What am I doing here? Oh, turn my mic up. Okay, there we go. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the same. Thank you. All right.
I'm sorry, Bob, this is Jessica Wood. I just want to interrupt for a sec, if you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind taking a roll call vote, not to be a pain, but I think that's what they recommend that for these virtual meetings. Would you mind taking a roll call vote for just all the votes?
Oh, roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote.
And yeah.
All right.
All right.
Jane,
Yes. Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
I'm yes. Emily,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Denny,
Yes.
Yes.
Andrew? Oh,
Yes.
Sorry, okay, all right. So we have all in favor, Jessica. All right, good. All right, next item is the DID plan approval. You want to take it?
Yes, thank you. Can you?
Yes, thank you. Can you?
You,
Thank you.
right there.
Bear with us, everyone. Okay, I think we're good. First of all, thank you again for working with us through this sort of unprecedented time and making time out of your day to join virtually. This is immensely helpful and will help us keep moving things along. I think what we really want to do is have some conversations here, but I'll set the table and then we can open it up for some dialogue. We have obviously been talking through the reauthorization a lot over the past 6 months. And after our meeting back on March 2nd, I think we had some pretty clear direction about where we wanted to take things. We were looking at a 3-year term. We were looking at wage increases for the ambassadors, funding, trying to provide some funding for social services and behavioral health, adjustments for inflation, and all of that would have amounted to about an 8% rate increase for FYs 21 through 23. And so for about the 10 days after that board meeting until we had a reauthorization steering committee on the 13th, we were really sharpening our pencils and gathering data. And then obviously the world changed dramatically on us. And so we were sort of left with a choice, and in talking through it with our committee about if we wanted to charge ahead with those recommendations in the expectation that things will get back to normal here soon, or sort of try to course correct. And it became a pretty easy decision even 10 days ago, and I think even more so now, that we had to be responsive to what was happening both in Grand Rapids but just around the globe. And so what we have talked through and what we proposed and was approved by the committee was looking at this as a rather than a multi-year authorization, really just looking at it as a 1-year extension of where we are today. And so what was included in your packet and what is in the plan now that we're asking for your consideration and recommendation, I'll summarize the highlights. It's a 1-year term, so just for FY21. There'd be no change in the existing assessment rate. We would also not be moving forward with any boundary change. We were just thinking about including that one small area on Sheldon. But again, given where we are, we have omitted that. When things settle down, which I underscore when, because we know this will eventually pass, but when things settle down, we will have the opportunity to revisit the reauthorization at any point in the next fiscal year, but we can also wait. We could wait until a year from now. And then the last thing on that is that if there are elements, once we get back to some semblance of normal, if there are things that we want to pursue because we do have a fund balance, we could consider utilizing that for things like an ambassador wage increase for a period of time, or looking at projects, special projects that might come along, particularly in the social service or behavioral health areas. So we could rely on that. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the plan. Before we kind of get into discussion, I want to touch on a couple of other things. First relates to the schedule, and I've gotten a couple questions from folks. I think just in light of what happened today with the governor's executive order and just sort of some uncertainty around where the world is. The action today that we're requesting by the board is not a final approval. We still have to go through the entire process with a public hearing, with the city commission, and ultimately we would be asking for city commission consideration in June. That date is still being finalized because the commission date for March was canceled. So we're either looking at a June 2nd or June 16th approval from city commission, which is either 10 or 12 weeks away. And so the thinking here is that we would know much more at that point and have better, I think, certainty about what we're stepping into with the reauthorization. But importantly, there's work that is still happening right now. The ambassadors and Clean Team are out on the streets doing sanitization. They're still doing outreach. They're still kind of that frontline eyes and ears on the street. We also want to be in the best possible position when we come out of this to really hit the ground running and be impactful, both with our programs, but also just with getting people back to normal downtown and inviting them to come. And so we want to be set up for that. And so that is kind of how we have thought about moving forward with the authorization now, but also understanding that there's just a ton of uncertainty out in the world. So I think those are the big things that I wanted to touch on. This has obviously changed a lot since we last met, and I'll stop there and I'll let Bob jump in to offer any additional thoughts, and then we can just open it up for some discussion and dialogue. So I am muting myself now.
Hang on. We're adjusting it so you can hear me. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Tim, for the summary there. The reauthorization committee, as you mentioned, met maybe the day that this coronavirus thing really started to hit here a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago. And kind of looked at each other, and Rick Wynn said, why don't, given the timing and what's going on and the uncertainty and companies closing up, we should not go back and try to do a 5-year or 3-year reauthorization. In fact, we just ought to carry over what we have and not put any increase in. So this budget reflects that. We're just going to carry over what we've had, no changes. There is still time to stop it if we need to, but the people are out working, probably will continue to keep working. There is Melvin, a $2 an hour increase in starting wage?
Yeah, roughly.
And really kind of across the board embedded in this budget. That was pretty loud and clear from the board and the reauthorization committee that the ambassadors and Clean Team.
That's through fund.
Pardon? Yeah.
We're
taking it and we're paying for that out of the fund balance. It was about $70,000 or $75,000, $71,000. Other than that, it's the budget has not changed from where we are today. But we thought we need to keep it going. There is time to stop it if we need to. I think it's a good budget. I think it's a good approach to carry this forward. So any questions, comments, observations, thoughts, pushback?
Bob, this is Kurt. I totally agree. I don't know that we have there's much else we can do under all the circumstances here. I think it's a prudent move. I assume the inebriate center thing will be something we would take up later then again, if, depending on what circumstances are.
The question was, we would take up the inebriate center funding again, depending on the circumstances
So,
changing.
I didn't hear
Go ahead. I'll jump in.
it. Okay,
Can you mute?
here?
Kurt, this is Tim. Give us 1 second.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so yeah, I think the thinking is that we could consider, again, once we have a little better understanding of where this all ends and what the world looks like, we could then consider things like the inebriate center, some of the other programs that the city was considering for their FY21 budget around behavioral health. We could consider those later on. I think we still have the flexibility within the fund balance to take on some of those things should the board decide they want to do that. But we just didn't feel like we knew enough about where things were to include it in any form at this point.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I would agree.
Any other questions or comments, observations? Kurt, was that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Is this silence mean we're ready to vote to approve this, to take it to the next step?
You need a motion.
Bob, this is Denny. I'll make a motion that we go ahead and approve this proposal.
Thank you, Denny. Can I have a second, please?
This is Josh. I'll second the motion.
All right. Any other comments, observations? Hearing none, let's take a roll call.
I'm gonna, I'm just wondering about the fund balance and whether that stays reserved for special projects or if there's some provisional, if businesses downtown are not reopened, whether we're applying that towards the basic services to lighten the load on an extra tax for this year for some downtown businesses.
Hey, Emily, this is Tim. I think if I understand your question correctly, the fund balance is flexible in the sense that we could at that point have a discussion about how we want to utilize it. So I think the short answer to your question is yes, it would still be available to offer support, whatever may be needed to businesses. I think importantly, again, the DID is but one of the tools that DGRI helps administer in this space. And so looking at the DDA and then, the partnerships that we have in place with the Chamber, with the Right Place, the other organizations in town, Experience Grand Rapids, Hispanic Chamber, et cetera, we are all collectively, we're on calls weekly, in some cases bi-weekly, to figure out where the gaps are going to be once the federal package is in place and once the state package is in place. What can we do to be most helpful? And so those are things we're closely monitoring. We don't know enough yet to provide more detail, but we are working with everyone to figure out how we can move the needle on this.
Tim, this is Denny. To Emily's question, point, if we were determined that some of this fund balance would go back, is there provisions in the enabling legislation to do anything other than a simple rebate to everybody? Is it possible to target the dollars to businesses that might be more hurt than others that are paying assessment, or would the enabling legislation limit us in terms of what we could do beyond just simply a rebate on the assessments paid?
Jessica, is that something that you could help us with?
Yeah. So the ordinance is actually what dictates the special assessment process under PA 120. And Denny, you're correct. It actually dictates that the rebates go back to the property owners proportionately. So that's what's in there. So it would be difficult to rebate it in any other fashion, although I can look at the ordinance and see if there's any room there.
Jessica, does that mean rebate to the current assessment payers?
It runs with the property, so it goes back to the property owner. But generally speaking, I mean, you keep sort of a fund balance, and it can be used for things within the plan that benefit the district generally. So it's such a rare situation when you actually have enough to refund. But if that were to occur, it very specifically says in the ordinance that it has to back to the property owners the same way that it was.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Bob?
Yes. Danny, does that answer you?
Yes, I was sort of suspecting that might be true. That's why I raised the question.
Okay. So, any other questions before we go through a roll call? Hearing none, we have a motion to approve the budget for assessment as presented for FY 2021. I'm going to go through those present. Jane?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
I'm yes. Emily? Emily?
That was
Josh?
a yes.
Emily's yes. Josh?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
Denny?
Yes,
Pat?
Yes.
Okay, we have unanimous approval.
Hey, Bob, this is Eric. I'm here.
Okay, Eric, we've just approved.
Oh, you haven't asked my vote yet.
Oh, you got your vote. Okay. I'm going to mark you down. There you go.
Well, I haven't voted. So,
you heard we have approval.
yeah, it looks like it's unanimous. So why would I vote no? So I'll vote yes. I'm voting yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what I voted for, but I'll vote yes.
Okay. You voted for the new budget for 1 year assessment with no change from where we are today.
Very good idea.
And the city's going to double what they pay. How's that? To make up the difference.
Right.
All right. Good. Thank you all. Melvin, you want to go through number 4 here, the block by block contract?
You're fine. I'm just gonna.
We just played musical chairs here.
Hi, everybody. So included in your packet was a memo and an additional copy, I believe, of the proposal for block by block services. We sent out an RFP, if you'll remember, in January, requesting new proposals from qualified vendors to administer our Downtown Ambassador program, primarily as a result of making sure, one, that we were getting the best deal that we could, that we weren't paying block by block something unreasonable. Two, to kind of look at the scope of services that Block by Block had initially proposed 5 years ago, evaluating how things had changed in our downtown in that 5 years and looking to revamp the scope of work. And kind of 3, looking at the wage that the ambassadors were currently being paid and looking for sort of estimates along with the scope of work and the value that we were getting to alter the pay, ideally up to $2 an hour, so that the ambassadors would start making $13 an hour. So we sent that bid out. We emailed it directly to our current vendor, Block by Block, as well as Streets Plus. And for those of you that don't know, Streets Plus is a Block by Block's other major national competitor in kind of this field. There are some other local vendors, specifically here in Michigan, primarily, their name escapes me, ABM. They had been the previous holder to the cleaning and maintenance contract before. We did not send it to them, as I did not have a contact to send it to, but we did also post the RFP on the IDA's website for a more broad and kind of general collection of RFPs. We received one qualified proposal from Block by Block, which is the one that was included in your packet. And it altered, for those of you that have read it, you can probably see that it's altered the scope of work much more aligned to the more placemaking entities and the maintenance and the beautification that really the DID and in some cases the DDA have really moved toward. Prior, it had really just been about sweeping sidewalks and changing trash cans. And I think while maintenance and beautification remain the core of what we do, we have kind of grown a little bit beyond just sweeping sidewalks and emptying trash cans and getting into more robust maintenance and continuing to work through the right-of-way maintenance agreements with the city that we're working on. So bringing this before you to essentially ask for approval for the Block by Block contract, or a recommendation of the Block by Block contract to the DGI Board of Advisors, and authorize the DID funding for an amount not to exceed $730,877 for contractual services for FY21. And if you did read the proposal, you'll probably note in there it said a 3-year contract. We will work with Block by Block to make sure that the contract is only for 1 year for the fiscal year term that we're currently proposing to recommending to the City Commission. And this was in the budget that you had just approved.
These amounts are, we based the budget on this proposed contract.
So if you couldn't hear Bob, he said we based the budget off of this contract amount.
So I need to. Okay. Unmute. There we go. Whoop. More touchy than mine. There you go. Okay. Melvin, thanks. I looked at this contract pretty heavily and did a lot of analysis with Melvin. Had a lot of questions that we've pushed back to Block by Block. They've been very responsive, very forthcoming. I find in their proposal there's a lot of data that they are collecting or beginning to collect, and a lot of reporting on what they're doing, which I think could be very helpful to the board. And that's all included in the package of what they're going to provide to us. And I've asked Melvin to make sure we begin to see that on some regular basis. I think it could be helpful to really understand what we're doing, the depth of what we're doing, help us track scope creep, and lots of other things. But give us some good data on what's happening out there. So I'm very comfortable with the excuse me, the contract, and I think pending. I can't imagine why they wouldn't. They're going to have to go. They're going to have to make it a 1-year extension or a 1-year contract. But I would certainly recommend approval. So, questions, comments? Hopefully, people had a chance to at least scan through it. Maybe read it. But hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve the new Block by Block contract for a period of 1 year, beginning July 1, 2020.
I'll make that motion.
All right, and a second?
This is Kurt, second.
Is that a second?
I think so. I didn't hear who it was. Can you ask?
Huh?
Can you ask who seconded?
Yeah, who seconded that, please?
This is Kurt.
Kurt.
Who?
Kurt.
Kurt, okay, I gotta turn this up. Okay, All right, we'll keep Jessica happy, do a roll call again. Eric,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
I'm yes. Emily,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Andrew,
We had to
Jessica.
head up the meeting.
Andrew's gone.
Okay. Jessica, did I get yours?
Clayton?
Denny,
Yes.
Pat? Pat? Pat's still on? Can you tell if Pat's on?
She's muted.
She's muted. So do we have 8?
Okay, yes.
There you go.
You got 8? All right. Okay, so the motion has passed. Thank you. What's going on next? Spring planning update?
That's Melvin. Oh, yeah.
What do you want to do?
I gotta mute you.
Mute it?
Hold on a second. Hi, everybody. Again. So included in your packet were 2 memos, and I'm going to kind of just talk about them together primarily. So later last year, as I kind of came on board and was doing assessments and observations throughout the district of some of the maintenance and beautification services that we were provided throughout the district, it kind of became clear that there were 14 planter beds over on William Street near Founders that were just in various states of disrepair. So lots of weeds, full of garbage, hadn't been taken care of at least in 2 or 3 planting seasons. And I think kind of stemmed a lot from this gap in understanding of where our services as the Downtown Improvement District started and where the city services or private property sort of started, and these kind of planters fell through the cracks. And as you can imagine, Founders was not happy. They have a very nice building over there with very beautiful landscaping all around it, and the public right-of-way or landscaping that is also in front of their building and across the street on Custer did not look very well. So we dispatched the horticulture team to go out there and clean them up. And then I asked McCandy Gardens, who is our current subcontractor underneath the Block by Block vendor team, to come and assess those planter beds and look at kind of their viability for the remainder of that year and kind of going forward. And they recommended that 9 of those beds along the southern block face of Williams, which is directly in front of Founders, including a large bed on the corner of Finney and Williams, needed to have the soil amended and be replanted due to extreme neglect. And the cost of that is just under $7,400, which would be in addition to the existing contract that technically Block by Block has with them, as these planters were not identified in that scope of work. Additionally, I asked McCandy to look at the 4 planter beds on Weston and Granville as well, because I felt like they had some of the similar issues. So the ambassadors were actually taking care of these. However, these planter beds, these plants, in these planter beds had been planted when the street space was redesigned. I'm not sure how long ago, but basically they too had been kind of struggling. The plants were kind of dying out. It gets very hot over there. There's not a lot of shade, so I'm not sure that even the plants that were there were the right type of species to be planted. And so I asked for their McCandy to take a look at those as well and give me an estimate for replacing those. And so for those 4 beds, to have the soil amended and new plantings done to enhance the beautification would be about $9,975. And you're probably wondering why it costs a little bit less to do 9 planters versus these 4 planters. The 9 planters are pretty small in comparison to these 4 planters. These 4 planters are pretty big and are pretty deep as a result. So that's where the price discrepancy comes in place. I'm happy to entertain any questions about these 2. I'm not certain that we're looking for a vote on these. This is more of an info item.
Are these in the district?
These are in the district, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
part of added as infrastructure when those intersections or corners were?
Yeah, so whenever the Granville corridor was redone, if you didn't hear the question is kind of when and why were those planters added? And so during the Granville corridor reconstruction, which I'm not sure when that was, the 4 planter beds on Weston and Granville were done, and then as part of the founders' redevelopment of that site a few years ago, those planters were installed as a street space project. And so I think those were one of those items that got installed and nobody quite knew who was supposed to take care of it, and so nobody took care of it. And so now we're having the ambassadors manage those planters, and in trying to keep with our high standards for the plants and green infrastructure in downtown, we're asking McCandy to go and rehab these this year. That would, ideally in the spring, summer, depending on when their schedule would allow.
So the thought is try to get it done this year?
Hang tight.
Try to get it done this year?
Yeah, the idea is to get it done either this spring or early summer.
Out of our current budget or
out of the existing special projects budget, yes.
All right. I think I've seen them. They're in bad shape.
Yeah, they're not in good shape at all.
Okay. Jim?
Or yeah. I'll go back there. Musical chairs. Musical chairs.
I'm back, everyone, from across the table. I actually, for my President and CEO report, I'm actually more interested in getting to our board member discussion because I'm really anxious to kind of hear how you all are viewing the current situation. And I think we can do that after our public comment. But I guess from my perspective, I wanted to highlight a couple of things. I touched on them a little bit when we were talking about the reauthorization plan, but a few things so that you're all familiar with what work we are doing currently in our new reality. I mentioned the ambassador redeployment, I should say, and so we are keeping I'm back. Always have a backup with a virtual meeting. So anyway, the ambassadors have been redeployed, and so they're focused heavily on sanitizing infrastructure in the district. The ambassadors are also still out, keeping their eyes and ears on the streets, doing as much interaction as possible and as safe as they can. I've also been participating, and Melvin has as well, on calls to understand how other communities are using their ambassador teams. We've been hearing a lot about just making sure that as people are coming down here less and places are empty, that they're keeping an eye on it and there's no vandalism, there's no break-ins, things like that. And so we are just continuing to monitor day to day as the situation evolves, and we'll continue to do so. A couple of other things to highlight. I mentioned we're in communication with our partners constantly. We have another phone call tomorrow afternoon. Again, just to make sure that locally we are coordinated and identifying resources that are available either via the state or federal government, and then continuing conversations about what we can do collectively to fill in any gaps that may exist. On a related note, we're putting together communications to try to capture business needs. So thinking about getting a survey out, and I believe Experience Grand Rapids has one out as of today, just to talk about things that businesses are doing locally, whether that's curbside service for restaurants, gift cards, some of those things that while things are shut down, allow them to continue to make revenue and make money. And so we're trying to identify those things so that we can get the word out. And then also doing some lobbying. So having conversations with our lobbyists and representatives in Lansing so that we're getting ahead of some of these executive orders and trying to introduce protections for businesses and for our downtown stakeholders. And so we are having conversations about protections for property owners and as well as commercial tenants, so that while things are shut down, they are not being, or the impact to them is being as lessened as at least as possible, if I can speak correctly. And so those are just some of the things that we're ongoing and having conversations on. The last thing is that, and I'd like to reiterate this, is while we don't know when, we do know that at some point this will pass and will end. And so we're doing everything we can to think strategically, 60, 90, 120 days out, so that when things get back to some semblance of normal, we are positioned to have a tremendous impact and invite people to get back downtown. And really support the businesses that are still here. And so the mayor, on that note, is convening an economics revitalization task force that I'm serving on, again, with some of the other partners locally. And just making sure that while we're sort of in this disaster mitigation phase, that we're also not losing sight of what work will need to happen when downtown is back open for business. So those are the things that I wanted to highlight. And of course, happy to take any questions that folks might have.
Is it Tim at this point, or want clarification on anything? We are down to the end. Is there anybody on public comment? There's nobody here. I don't hear of anybody. Any board member comments? Go around the table and got anything to add, suggest? Want to hear more about, less about?
I'd like to hear less about COVID-19. This is Denny. I just FYI related to something Tim just said. We're already seeing commercial tenants in some of the properties asking for to not pay rent because they've, photographers, things like that are basically out of gigs to make money on, and so we're seeing that happen already. Just got notification about 15 minutes ago that 3 of our construction projects are under stoppage rules. So that means essentially we're going to be substantially delayed on several construction projects right now. So it's really pretty extraordinary, some of the impacts, and that's just a few of them. I've got other things going on that are not directly related to them. Anyway, just FYI.
Thank you. Good information. Good to know. Anybody else? Any comments?
Hey, all, thanks so much for the work, and I appreciate some of the efforts taken so that a reboot can happen and some of this work can continue when we're in a place where that's possible. You can probably tell I have some reservations and anxieties, but that's probably par for the course for everybody right around now. As relates to our businesses, as probably everyone's aware, theaters have shut down across the country, and that would include ours. So we are, for the first time in 75 years, with all of our theaters with closed doors, and that's a pretty unsettling situation. We had to not put on the last 3 of the Showspan shows, which was also a big hit for our company, which does a lot of things with public spaces. So I think that we are, as a company, trying to be gearing up to have all of the reservoirs possible when that time comes. It feels a little uncertain, and see some similar work being taken on part of the DID to make sure that there's the capacity for systems go at some hopefully soon point in the near future. I don't know that I have a lot more comments than that, but just some sensitivity that I do think that this is the right first step to take today to approve this budget, and I'm very hopeful that we're in a very different situation 30, 60, 90 days out. And yet hopeful that whomever approves this budget or the commission is mindful of where we're at that time. I don't know if that's language we need to couch, and I'm sure that that's something that will just happen.
Right. Good. Thanks, Emily. Anybody else?
Yeah, Bob, this is Eric. I want to thank Emily for her comments and Tim and everybody else for their comments too. we are very focused on the recovery and want to make sure that we're poised for accelerating out of this to that when the time is right. So I don't know if that's going to be July 4th or Labor Day or start of football season, but we know it's coming, and there'll be a time to celebrate, and there'll be a time to get on with the business of being Grand Rapids. And so I think the DID is a very, very positive part of having that happen. And I think that the persons who make up the DID who are on this board are also very important in that way. So I hear a lot of keep the faith, keep working, keep planning ahead, because there is a next chapter to this once we get through here. So keep that up, because that's what'll make us that'll make it really good for us.
Thanks, Eric. Good comment. Yep. Anybody else? Okay. Hearing none, thank you all for your attention today, particularly in these tough times. I'm sure we got a lot of other things on our mind, but I do think what we're doing is good stuff. We need to be sensitive, though, as everybody is suggesting, and move forward. We'll keep you all informed as things progress and as we see what happens here in the next couple, 3 weeks. So with that, I will move to adjourn the meeting, and stay tuned. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the week. Be good.
Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
healthy. Stay healthy. What do I do?
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Yep.